Hey, guys, and welcome to season 3, episode 4. Almost had a tongue twister there. Tongue twister there. And so last episode, we talked to Diversity Window, Jaquanda Nelson, the CEO over at Diversity Window, Jaquanda Nelson, and she was fantabulous. You guys know that I make up words. You're already used to that. This week, we have a familiar face back in the building, huh? Okay. So we're going to be talking to Tatiana over at Uber. I'm super excited to have her on the show with us again. For those of you that do not know Tatiana, introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit more about what you do over at Uber.
Great. So super happy to have you, and always nice to connect with you, Juanita. So I lead Uber's global workforce management team. So basically, we do demand planning for all of support for our global customers. And to us, a customer might be somebody who's a rider or somebody who's an eater on our delivery platform. It might be an earner, so somebody who drives for us or somebody who does courier service. It could also be a restaurant. It could be a grocery store. So we support all the various types of contacts that might arise from a trip or an order that happens with Uber. We try to figure out what type of contact it's going to be, what country, what language, what type, what channel it's going to come in on. And so we do all of that strategic demand planning of figuring that out to, well, what do we need to do to support that? And how long will those contacts take? And how do we make sure that they are being answered very quickly with the right people in the right place? So we turn that contact forecast into requirements to figure out how much staff is needed to meet those demands on a global basis.
Well, thank you so much for being back with us. I know our last show, we had such a great show, so many topics that I was like, oh man, I can't wait to dig into that. But I try to keep the content at a reasonable hour. So we're going to try to do that same thing today and keep it at a reasonable time. But thank you so much. I'm super honored every time we talk and you come on the show because, you always have such great insight and value add, I think, to our audience. And I always learn something, I think, as well. So thank you again so much for being on the show. So let's hop right in, shall we? You ready?
Yeah.
You ready? Yeah. All right. So you guys know that this series is talking about the future of work. So Tatiana, when I say future of work, what does that mean to you personally?
Personally, I think it really means being able to match how and where and even sometimes when people want to work, and having flexibility with location, scheduling. Like me personally, as a working mom, I have been able to have jobs over probably the past 15 years where I've had flexibility in my location. And so there have been times where I've been a remote employee, been able to work from home, balancing out the needs of being a mom with having a demanding job. And so I think that's starting to expand and not quite being so unusual in this day and age. And understanding that that sort of flexibility really drives employee satisfaction. And one of the things that you and I've talked about is how employee satisfaction drives and contributes to customer satisfaction. So, right now, I think there's a lot more power in the hands of the employees, and employers really need to be receptive and understanding of that. I think that the Great Resignation has been a true wake-up call for all employers.
Yeah. So when you say the future of work or when you hear future of work, you typically think, flexibility and how, like where I can work, when I can work, and kind of putting that back in the hands of the employee or in some cases, even the contractor, whatever that kind of working relationship is. How do you think, that makes me think, because I know you're over, demand and capacity pretty much at Uber. I wonder, how does that play an impact in companies that don't have as much flexibility? How do you think we solve for those type of things if they don't have as much flexibility? Or, I'm always thinking about those types of things because my background too, is in workforce management, right? So I'm always thinking in terms of what the very same thing that you do, right? With forecasting the demand and what are the contacts, where are they coming from, and as a byproduct then we figure out who needs to work what and when they need to be there. But if we take that outside of that model and we think about maybe restaurants, or we think about different types of industries, what about they don't have that kind of flexibility? How do they still take that same kind of concept and apply it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because a lot of work really is around when the customer needs you, right? So when I say flexibility, flexibility for somebody who's, say, a frontline employee, so somebody who's actually answering those contacts or responsible for managing that team, they're not necessarily going to be able to work when they want to work if that doesn't match what the customer needs. But what's possible is, could you be more flexible in, okay, maybe what I want to do is not your traditional, 40-hour schedule, working 8-hour days, 4 days a week, and I want to do something different. I think of an example from years and years ago. We used to have a contact center when I worked for another company that was a cell phone carrier that was in Oregon, and it was in a ski town. And we always struggled with staffing on the weekends. Nobody wanted to work on the weekends. And the teams were like, we want to have more flexible schedules, so we want to have the opportunity to go skiing more. So they proposed to us as a workforce management team, what if we did 3 12-hour shifts and did work 36 hours? We still they got to maintain their benefits. But that's what we want to do. And I was like, gosh, that sounds terrible. I couldn't imagine, being on the phones for 12 hours a day, for 3 days straight. But what we agreed to is like, okay, let's try it. Let's have you work Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which is when I was struggling anyway. And I thought for sure nobody would ever want to work it because it wasn't what I would want to do. It was one of the most popular schedules because people were like, I can hit the ski slopes when it's not busy, and I have 4 days off. And those were some of the most productive people that we had in that contact center. So yes, I had to match them with when we needed them, but we were like, well, what flexibility can we allow you within what's available? And so that really opened my eyes up. And just because I think it's not a schedule that would work for me doesn't mean that's not an ideal schedule. So I think from like a workforce management standpoint, don't always assume that like your reality is someone else's. There may be more flexibility in what you can offer and what they can offer back that works for both the company and the employee. So just keep an open mind and ask questions.
That's so good. That is so good because it's a lot of times as workforce managers or just, leaders, period, we're thinking about things from our perspective. Like, I wouldn't want to work 12-hour days, 3 days a week. Like, that's, just, but, you kind of get that feel, right? But somebody else might say that's prime for me because the days that I actually need off are days I'm at school, or I want to hit the slopes, or I want to do whatever. I have other types of commitments. And that's what I really loved about workforce management. So again, my background's in workforce management is I love the creative parts of it, of like creating split shifts and stair step shifts and all different types of schedules that could meet not only the business needs, but the employees' needs as well. Because I think, again, we talked about this earlier, when companies say, oh, we focus on CX customer experience. And I'm like, but if you're not focusing on EX, are you really focusing on CX? Because employees are never going to treat the customer better than they're being treated themselves. And if they don't have flexibility, a lot of times they're not going to be flexible on the phone and look for other options to service the customer, right? They're going to be like, well, this is the way it is and deal with it, right? Because that's how you as a company treat the employee. This is the schedule we got, deal with it, right? But when you show flexibility, then I think that also as a company, when you show flexibility as a company and can think outside of the box, then that drives and models that behavior to the employee that, hey, what are some of the things? Did I check the SharePoint first, or did I check this resource? Did I exhaust all possible options to help this customer on the phone and think outside of the box? Like, it's just, we're doing the same thing. So I think we have to be what we want to see, right? And so as an employer, when we think about the future of work and all of those different things, we have to become what it is that we want to see. So if we want to see more humanity and we want to see, more diversity, we want to see more flexibility and our products expand, then we have to do that and become that as well. Don't get me to preaching, okay, Tatiana? I think that was amazing.
Totally agree with you.
That's amazing. So what do you think? Okay, so then what do you think about all of this tech and AI talk? When we talk about the future, right, a lot of conversation that we're having right now in the industry is around automation, technology, AI, machine learning. It's all around these things that really kind of help us scale and lift the business. Do you think that they can coexist? All the technology and the advancements and with us moving into the future of work and still keeping a human experience?
Yeah, I think that they can. I think that when I think about tech and AI in our or AI in our industry, I think about the ability to take some of the more tactical, redundant type of work that we do, and having that automated, having the teams then kind of move to more. I'm looking at outliers. I'm looking at when it doesn't fit perfectly in a box. Having more time to actually analyze, okay, so I understand that we're missing service levels consistently. Well, what is driving that? So if my people are freed up so they're not doing sort of that tactical work all the time, and they're maybe just setting up the constraints, then they're going to have an opportunity to be more strategic and to understand how, the points connect and being able to make recommendations. And one of the things I really, really work with my personal team on is not just to be an executor of someone else's strategy, but also be a consultant back to the business. So, we might be asked, okay, well, I want to have something route that does X, Y, and Z. It's like really the question should be like, what's the end result you want, and what are the business rules you want to follow? And then maybe I can give you 3 or 4 options, all that have different impacts on your CSAT, have different impacts on your AHT, different impacts on service level, and help you make the best decision for what matters to you. So I really think that, tech and AI can help free up, WFM teams so they can be that consultant back to the business and show their value in a way that's more than, checking, doing checklists and things like that.
Yeah, that made me think. So recently, I said I was going to do a talk on this. So I think this actually just fits, right, as an example to what you're saying. This past weekend, my husband and I, we took the girls, we were going to Books A Million to buy some books. And so we stopped while we were out. We stopped at Checkers, right? So we stopped at Checkers. It's for those of you that don't have Checkers, it's like O'Reilly's up north. I think it's called O'Reilly's or something like that. Down here in the South, I'm in Florida, we call it Checkers. Anyway, fast food restaurant. I feel like I always have to give context, my storytelling. Anyway, so we stopped there and we pulled through the drive-through, and it's completely automated. Completely automated. The speaker comes on. Thank you for patronizing us here at Checkers. This speaker is being monitored for quality and training assurance purposes. Please proceed with your order. And I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a second. This is not just the automated speaker when you pull up and they're like, somebody will be with you right away. This is completely automated. So it took our order, right? Where my husband's like, hey, I want a number 1. And it was like, okay, what drink would you like with that? And we're just looking at each other like, this is so fun. And then, and then after he gave the drink, then it's like, would you like that a double? Or it automatically knew the different options to offer. Is that all? Does that complete your order? He was like, no, actually, I would like a number 2 and this and this and that. We were ordering for the whole family. So it got through the order, repeated the order, and then also gave us the total. Please proceed to window 2 to pay for your order. So I'm like, this is next level stuff, right? This is contact center coming out into the real world. Like, not that contact center is not the real world, but the technology that we've had in contact center all along, that's now being that's at restaurants. You know what I'm saying? So we pull up to the second window, pay for our order and everything. And I'm like, hey, do you guys know? Because obviously I have a call center background. I say, do you guys know what system you're using? And he's like, I don't. I don't know what that is. I was like, but imagine the workload that has, that simple task, right? That has reduced the need to do something simple, right? It didn't do away with the need for the person to make the meal still, right? Or collect the money. We still need those people, right? But you no longer need someone to say, hey, what are you going to order? Hey, can you repeat that? I didn't hear you quite that well. Or, oh, you said a number 3 or a number 2, or they forgot your drink, or whatever the case may be. And so I think that goes back to, again, your point about it allows us to do more of the high level things, right? Someone still has to make the food. Someone still has to do all of these different things. And the technology allows for us to, be able to do the lower task, right? The repeatable task. Yeah, that's initially what I thought about when that experience when you were talking through that.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you think? The last time when we talked about your ERGs over at Uber, like the employee resource groups. How do you think that plays a factor in the future of work, like companies having employee resource groups? How does that play a factor in the future of work and also diversity?
I think that employee resource groups are a really important part of a culture because they really can represent all different types of employees. From like here at Uber, we've got groups of people who identify as women. We have some for veterans. We have one for parents. We even have one called Equal at Uber that represents those that come from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And so they each represent a different subsection of the employee, and they have different needs or desires to be successful at work. So, whether or not you are a part of one of these groups or even being an ally and understanding, the challenges or the concerns that a group has, is incredibly important and very insightful as you're trying to think about policy and process, of like how to of what you're doing, with employees. Like, I personally had listened to some discussions and presentations that one of our ERGs that represents Asians at Uber. And I learned through that a lot of the Asians feel pressure of being the perfect minority and how that stereotype represents that thinking and the pressure that puts on. And I really hadn't considered that viewpoint before. And it really helped me better understand some of the impact and pressure that might have on those on my own personal team might feel. So, to kind of get this back to like how this means to the future of work, these groups really help us consider various viewpoints when it comes to shaping policy, even when it comes to who we're bringing on to interview. One of the things that I'm always very adamant about is when I interview people for various roles, and keep in mind, I have a global team. So diversity means something different when I'm interviewing somebody who lives in the Philippines than it will if I'm interviewing somebody who lives in Amsterdam. But making sure there's diversity in the candidates that you select, making sure that there is diversity in the panel interviews that happen. But you really have to understand how those various groups, feel about work and like makes them successful to really understand like how to shape your future of work. At Uber, we had some pushback when we originally talked about our work from home policies, and there was some vocal, of like how that should be applied, and really listening to, I have to give a lot of credit to our C-suite executives of really listening to how employees felt about the policies, that they were willing to make some changes to be more accommodating.
Amazing. Yeah, I think you said something that made me really actually think about, when we think about having these employee resource groups and, having an Asian community and having these different dynamics, right? Their perspective and their culture shapes a lot in how we show up, right? And if the culture says, "Hey, I need to be the best," or I need to, that's just the dynamic of the culture, right? I need to be the best. I need to be perfect. Then that's going to show up in work, right? Which can come across to maybe my boss or my team members as overcompensating, or can come across as something different that is not, that's not what it means in my culture, right? So I think having these employee resource groups really allow others to understand more about your culture and how you show up, how you show up to work. You may see it as I'm overcompensating or I'm doing the most, right? Where in my culture, that's expected. Right? If I come home with anything less than an A, I'm a failure. Right? And so understanding that dynamic and being, I think that's how employee resource groups really kind of help shape the future of work, right? Is understanding everyone else can understand how, this role or how this person shows up, at the company, when we think about actionable things, right? Because D&I is not a new conversation. Future of work is something that, we've been talking about for some time. When we think about D&I, future of work, inclusion, equity, diversity, all those different things, what are some actionable things that you think companies can do? And even, that you lead a global team, you're doing to really drive diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only just keep the conversation going, but things that you're doing yourself that contributes to that.
Sure, I'll answer it both ways. So I think from like a company perspective, a lot of companies do things like employee surveys to either feel like how employees are feeling about the company itself and the culture of the company, to how they see their manager and the support they're getting. So I think really having an opportunity for employees to express in an anonymous way, how they're feeling about, the company itself, the direction, giving them a platform for that, and actually looking through that and going, what can we be doing differently, as a company, setting, particular goals around some of these, transparency over some of the metrics, right? So, for instance, transparency in my particular group over, who my female identifying population is, and do I have a problem in that area? Some groups don't. There are a lot of groups, within Uber that are 50-50, and in even some cases are even more representative of the female population. My team being an analytics team, we actually don't have great numbers when it comes to female identifying employees. And so we just had an all hands earlier today. I shared those numbers with the team. I shared my concern, with the teams, and we made commitments to being able to do two things. One, to grow the representation of that group, but also recognizing that the representation doesn't look the same at all levels. So you could have, and I see this happen a lot with companies where, they might pat themselves on the back, especially companies of contact centers, like we've got great representation, good diversity. But when you really kind of peek back, it's the what we would call hourly roles that are well represented. And as you get higher up on the food chain, you get less people of color, you have less women. And so saying, okay, but it matters by level, and being very transparent to that, and setting actual goals. So one of the things that we have as a goal in our team is we have two different types of levels within. So some are the hourly support, more new to the organization, new to workforce management. Those would be your more tactical roles like real-time analysts or schedulers, to the more professional, highly tenured roles where you might, manage a program. So we have put some numbers around. We are looking to promote from within. So not always hire externally, but promote from within, that those support positions to our more professional position, which will drive those numbers up and help our diversity numbers as a result, because that is where most of my women and most of the people of color and other diverse groups, reside. So like making a commitment, making it part of my personal goals that I have published and shared with my team, and holding myself accountable.
Yeah. That's so amazing. Uber, I love when you talk about, I love when every time when you talk about the work that you're doing internally with Uber and D&I and all of those different things, it always gives me the warm and fuzzies. It's like, that's so amazing because, we can talk about it all day, right? We can put mission statements up on the wall. We can, do all the things that make us feel good, right? But until we have transparency, like you said, right? Like, what do the numbers say? And then also, setting goals to say, okay, diversity, equity, and inclusion matters at all levels, right? So it's not just the frontline employees or the hourly employees, right? That's one dynamic, right? We got to get them in, but also, are we promoting? Are we promoting them to the higher levels, the levels that make decisions, right? To the roles that say, hey, we're the ones that make the decisions, and we understand because we're well represented, right? I think that matters. That also matters. So that's really cool that you guys are doing that there. 2 more questions, and we'll wrap it up. Okay. So this particular question, I've been asking this as of late when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, because I'm always interested in what people think. But, when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, is there one component that you think is more important or more impactful? I'll say that, more impactful than the other out of D, E, and the I.
Yeah, so I really think that, when you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to have diversity first, right? So if you have, say, only 10% of your staff that is considered, someone of color, it's very hard to say that you have an inclusive voice for that small percentage. So I think that's the first thing is, to be truly looking at it from various angles, having that diversity, having different backgrounds. And that background might be your skin tone or race. It might be your socioeconomic background. It might be, what schools you go to. It means something a little bit differently. And I've had some epiphanies working at Uber and being on a global team that what I consider diversity here as an American woman of color isn't exactly the same thing as somebody who might be a male who sits in India. So it does mean something different, and you have to be aware of that. But again, I think that diversity, it has to start there before you really can drive equity and fairness or inclusive voices because of that.
That's so good. The thing that really hit home for me is when you said, you had an epiphany about diversity, equity, and inclusion being a global leader over at Uber, that some diversity may be different to you than it is to your counterpart over in India, right? And that's so true, which is why I'm always saying to people, I think I say this so much. I'm always saying, I think we do a disservice. We do DE&I so poorly, right? When we reduce it to race, right? When we say being diverse is just about race, then we're diverse and we're different in so many different ways, right? You can take 2 African American females, right, women, and they still be diverse, right? Because one comes from one background and one comes from a completely another background, right? So they can still be diverse and be the same. And so I think, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have to broaden, we have to make that conversation much larger than just race. We have to talk about, your education, like how what is your experience? How does your experience differ from my experience? You have an Ivy Leaguer, and you have someone who's never been to college, and they still offer very valid and very varying perspectives that can add value to the table, right? And so I think that is so important. And like you said, diversity, equity, inclusion can mean something completely different to you versus what it means to me. And I think until we start having conversations outside of race, that's one thing, right? That is, we do need that, right? We do need more African American women and men and part of the conversation, but we need Asians too. We need all colors. We need all, we need all backgrounds represented, and it has to go beyond just color,
Yeah, and I think the other thing too that's kind of an aha is, it's hard when you're a company, like what does your customer population look like? And so that's also an aha. It's like if your organization is primarily, white or Asian, but the customers, you think about Uber, like a lot of our drivers, are from various countries. We need to look more representative of who we're supporting in order to understand where they're coming from. So I think that was a big aha for the company.
Yeah, that's good. That is so good. Yeah. All right. You ready for the shots fired? So I have a segment called Shots Fired. It's going to be easy. So shots fired. Okay, I'm going to say 2 words, right? And then you're going to tell me what immediately pops to mind. Okay? All right, cool. Equity, equality.
Fairness and I guess transparency.
Okay. DE&I and affirmative action.
Ooh, bringing people to the table that didn't have the opportunity to be there before.
Okay. Great resignation and employee engagement.
Those go hand in hand. I think listening to the employee and having that engagement will drive stickiness within your organization when it comes to employment.
Yeah. I love these. I love the shot fires. Thank you so much. So those are the questions, right? Or those are the words. But I love those words because they're ones that are buzzing right now. We keep hearing about, great resignation, employee engagement, CX, customer experience, and D&I, and all these different buzzwords. And I think they mean something different to everyone, right? Which is again what we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the first place, right? How do we bring varying perspectives and thoughts and things like that to the table so that we can be more inclusive, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me what's next for Uber. What you can tell me, right? Tell me what's next for Uber. What are you working on, and different things like that.
We actually really looked at kind of our strategy, and we made sure to have, and actually it's the first part. We, have kind of a 3-pillar approach of how we're looking at it, but people's the first one. So really focusing on our people, really focusing on getting them the resources, the training, really helping them understand career pathing, at Uber. So we actually, I think I mentioned earlier, we did my all hands presentation. We laid out some of the cool programs that we're going to do. We highlight promotions every single all hands. And it gets people excited about what the possibilities are. A lot of people fall into this line of work. I don't know, nobody says, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. I want to be a workforce manager.
Yeah. We're going to change that though. We're going to change that.
We're working on it. We are working on it. So we really want people to see that this is a career that you can grow within. And so, putting together initiatives that drive that. And because of that, it helps us drive our other initiatives about being a more efficient, effective, within Uber as an organization. So that's next for us. I'm also launching a mentorship program within my own team, and we've extended this beyond, called Women in Analytics. About doing small group mentoring and helping women find confidence in working in tech fields. I know this is something that's near and dear to your heart.
Yes.
So we are kicking that off and hope to have our inaugural meeting next month.
Yes. Okay. All right. We're going to be talking about that. I just want you to know. Well, thank you so much, Tatiana, for hanging out with me today and coming on the show. Hang out with me a little bit. I'm going to wrap the show and then I'll be right
Yep,
over with you, okay?
sounds good.
All right. Wow. My mind is always blown when I talk to Tatiana. She's just a breath of fresh air, and I love all of the things that she's doing over at Uber. We need more women in technology, women in leadership roles that are doing exactly what Tatiana's doing. She's creating visibility, she's creating programs, and she's leading the way. She's not just talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and talking about leadership, but she's exempling leadership. And I think that that's what the future of work looks like, having more of those voices, having more of those people that are going to just take the bull by the horns and lead the charge. And so thank you so much for tuning in to this show today. I hope it was insightful to you. Until next time, guys,